So we're going to move over to, yes, the grammar lesson quickly here with tofugu. And this really should have been in one of our first episodes, I think. We should have started from the basics, but we didn't because we're odd. We also started from the fourth episode of Watch Dreams, Watch Anime, so that was kind of odd. We like to do things a little bit differently here. So, hua is I shouldn't say that, sorry. Wa, I don't want to confuse people.
Yeah.
Is again a topic marker. Woohoo! And so, watashi wa. So I, watashi wa gohan o taberu. Like I eat food, right? Gohan o. And so o is the other particle, just like wa. Wa is like the topic marker, it's a subject marker. Which we all should know, right, at this point, if you're listening, if you're studying Japanese, if you kind of know those basics, right? Just like the subject marker.
Like the earliest things.
Yes. But there are like different ways to use it. There are different nuances to it. We also talked, I think, last week about sort of clauses. Like you can say, Nihon e iku no wa itsu desu ka? So this is a more polite sentence, right? So Nihon e iku no wa itsu desu ka? So you can make you can make the whole sentence into a noun by using koto, or you can use no, and it turns that whole sentence into like a noun, and you can use wa as the particle.
Oh, that's right.
To like mark the subject of what you're talking about, and then you ask your question or say something, right? So Nihon e iku no wa itsu desu ka? So they put some brackets around here to help you see the sentence. Let me bump this font up a little bit to help. They put some brackets around this first clause to make it clear, there's like two sentences happening here, and really in one sentence. But you wouldn't say it like that. You would say Nihon e iku no wa. And honestly, I would say Nihon ni iku no wa itsu desu ka? That's how I would say it. But e is the more polite way to say it, right? It's like e almost means sort of direction of Japan.
Oh.
So again, like things that are not direct, it's less direct. So like the things that are not less direct are a little bit more polite in Japanese, which is interesting. So, there's another way there's a couple nuances, right? So like kohi o nomimasu ka? Like, do you drink coffee? It's very direct again, more like polite. Sorry, Howard, if you were to make kohi the topic, that's a little unexpected. Kohi wa nomimasu ka? Yeah, so I like that they're saying this. They're like, you're talking about, you're kind of, there's a bunch of little nuances that are different. Let me know if you have a better way to explain it. But like kohi wa nomimasu ka? It's sort of like you're setting the tone for the conversation. Like, oh, coffee. Oh, do you want some? Versus kohi o nomimasu ka? Do you want coffee, or do you drink coffee? So if you're like asking somebody if they want to drink coffee, you'd say kohi o nomimasen ka? That's a way to ask, like, do you not want to drink coffee? Is the polite way in Japanese to say, do you want to drink coffee? It's really weird. So right, literally, I might want to say kohi o nomitai desu ka? Do you like to drink coffee? Do you want to drink coffee? Like, do you want to drink coffee? But in reality, the way you like ask, the way you ask it though to most people is like kohi o nomimasen ka? Or kohi wa nomimasen ka? There's a little bit of a nuance, but think of it as like, oh, coffee. Like, oh, coffee. Do you want some? Do you want to drink? Do you want to drink? Versus, do you want to drink coffee? There's one that's a little bit more direct, and there's another one that's a little bit less direct, and it has a little bit of a different nuance, but it's basically the same thing. Just a different way to say the same thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There's another thing. There's another example. There's a contrasting two topics, right? Tokyo wa atae ga takai kedo, inaka wa atae ga yasui. So, did I say that wrong? So, butsutai? Buka. Sorry. Buka is like living expenses. Yeah. Yeah, I saw this one, atae, and I just read it as atae. But buka. So, 日本は物価が高いけど、田舎は物価が安い. So I think I said earlier too that maybe I didn't in another episode, but um, you have one sentence, you're saying something. In Tokyo, the buka, like the living expenses and stuff like that, takai, kedo, but. So in Tokyo, it's the living expenses are high, but
Hmm.
in the countryside, the living expenses are cheap. And yeah, and they say high cost of living. Sorry, I wasn't reading that. Um, so it's a way to yeah, I like this. I like this little thing
Yeah.
here. It's like a spotlight on the topic, and this is
Mhm.
supposed to be lots of yen, 1 yen. I like this comic here.
Yeah.
So it's just like shining the spotlight. You're marking the subject, which I love about Japanese. Like you can use particles to be very explicit on what you're trying to say.
Hmm.
Um, so another way to do it too is a little bit more. You can change the nuance of things too. So you can use like the noun form of an e adjective. So for example, muzakashi, the noun form of that adjective, you would take out the e, add a ku, right? So you'd say muzakashi, muzakashiku. So that is now the noun of difficult, muzakashi. So now you're saying difficulty, kind of, and then you could say wa. So muzakashiku wa is like difficulty. Nai, nai is like there's none of something, right?
Hmm.
So muzakashiku wa nai, there's no difficulty. But more natural English should be it's not difficult. Muzakashiku nai is a more like casual,
A little more
sort of
direct too.
more direct, like to the point type of way to say it. Muzakashiku wa nai is a way to sort of like draw it out.
I see.
It's difficulty. It's not that difficult. Like difficulty, there's none. That's a weird way to say that in English, but I can't really think of a really quick correlation. It's just it's a different way to say the same thing. You're just kind of putting wa there to break it up, and then the nuance there is muzukashiku wa nai. Muzukashiku wa, as for the difficulty, nai. It's not there. So you're kind of emphasizing it in a different way, sort of more just to be like sort of speak eloquently. Another way to say this too, right, is if it's a keigo, like more formal speak, you'd say like muzukashiku wa arimasen. Ga is like a polite way to say but. At the end of a sentence, it means like the polite way to say but. So muzukashiku wa arimasen ga jikan ga kakarimasu. So difficulty, there isn't any difficulty, but it's gonna be, it's gonna take time. I like the way that they put this in the article. It's not exactly difficult, so that's sort of the nuance, right? Is it's exactly is a way to put a nuance, like a spin on the way you're saying it, right? Because without the exactly, it's not difficult, right? That's kind of like straight to the point, very neutral. If you're saying it's not exactly difficult, it means like there's more you want to say, like there's more to be said. That's kind of, I guess, the nuance of adding wa there.
I see now.
Because you're like marking the subject and you're just saying nai, and then probably the person you're talking to will say like, oh, okay, why? You're talking about the subject, muzukashiku, difficulty. Like, okay, if it's not difficult, why is it difficult? And kind of like lead into the conversation more. But if you just say muzukashiku nai, it kind of ends the conversation. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's not difficult. That's like a fact.
Yeah, I guess the way I'm thinking of it is because you're adding the wa in there, you're like keeping the topic open still.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure. There's another way to say, actually, so interestingly enough, you've probably heard of janai, right? So you're saying like the negative form of a noun, for example. So yume janai. I know that I'm showing right here, if I highlight it, I'm showing yume de wa nai. Ja is just the colloquial way to say dewa. So I'm sure you've probably heard people say dewa, like dewa. Literally, they're saying the more polite version of ja, because ja is just sort of like a rendaku of dewa. So basically, over time, people found it easier to say ja than it is dewa, like especially
Mm-hmm.
when you're speaking quickly. That's the reason rendaku exists, is because it's easier to say than like toki toki is harder to say fast than toki doki.
Yeah.
So in the same vein of like train of thought, ja is easier to say than dewa. So
Yeah.
yume janai is easier to say than yume dewa nai quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a more polite way to say, like a kind of a slower, more polite way to say ja.
Okay.
Yume de wa nai ga ninki wa aru. So that's another weird way, right? So ninki wa aru. Ninki des is fine too.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but but here they use ninki wa aru. So again, those are like the kind of a nuance. It's not really direct necessarily. It's not like to the point. It's sort of adding a
Yeah.
nuance of like kind of unsurety, which kind of begs more questions. So another example too. Sensei de wa arimasen ga, 説明がうまいな人、上手な人です。So 説明が上手な人です。This is kind of, there's different ways to say this. There's like 上手 and there's also うまい. This has like exactly the same kanji,
Oh,
which is sort
what
of
about meaning too?
the meaning is pretty much the same. Umai also means skilled. The difference is that there's an e at the end of umai. This is the na adjective, which is a different word,
Oh,
same meaning pretty much, which is jozu, and then you add na to it, right, to make it a na adjective. You learn this in Wanikani too. Jozu, I think, comes up really quickly. Umai comes up a little bit later. So yeah, I mean, different ways to say it's pretty much the same thing. So again, sensei de wa arimasen ga, he's not a teacher. So not exactly a teacher. It's kind of the nuance there. And they put actually, but I think I like their exactly, their English example. They're not exactly
yeah.
a teacher. You're kind of like adding
Because it
sort of a
still begs
lightness to it.
more. Yeah. It
It
still
kind of
keeps it
begs more
open
questions.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, what do you mean by not exactly? Like, there's usually more information coming.
There's more information
Put it
coming,
that way.
or there's not, and like the listener will probably ask,
Mm-hmm.
like, "Sensei de wa nai ga." Stop. And then somebody, like, okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
Um, so this is what are they saying here? Apart from very specific circumstances, ha or wa cannot be used immediately after question words like dare, nani, doko, because the topic starts something that lists your consciousness. The very nature of the question was, if we know, yeah, right. So like, this is a good point. This is a really, really good point. So dare wa, you would never say that. Like doko wa, you'd never say that. And they're saying because the topic is always something that is on the listener's consciousness. The very nature of the question words is that they're asking about unknown information.
Mm.
So wa is sort of like when you know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're saying you don't know, you probably use ga to like emphasize that this is the thing and I want to ask about it. So that's a really good point. I like this that they put this in the article just to make it different than wa, because ga is more of like you're adding emphasis. If you're asking a question, then you probably use ga most of the time, unless you know the subject. Like even 彼が何歳ですか?彼は何歳? You probably say 彼が何歳ですか? Yeah, when you're asking a question. But especially with like 誰 or どこ, どこが食べたい? Stuff like that. Yeah, it's all like, again, it's all touch and feel, but I think that that's a good distinction to make, is you would never use like wa after doko or dare. Those kind of like direct question, who, what, when. いつは、いつが始める、いつ始める, Yeah, I don't think you have to use wa after that. You probably use ga, because it's like a question that you don't really know the topic of quite yet. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think so.
So yeah, this is an interesting way. Another interesting point. Um, Wa can be used with some particles to make compound particles. Um, However, it cannot be combined with other particles like ga, o, or wo, or mo. Yeah, that's an interesting point. You'll notice this when you're reading though. You'll never see like wa something something. Sorry, you'll never see like wa mo. You'll see dewa,
Normal.
um, but you can't really mix ga and wa together, for example, and you can't mix o and wa together. Um, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense in a sentence. Um, yeah, but niwa, sorry, dewa and niwa, it's you can use. So you can't use owa or something. You can't
Mm.
use um, gawa. That's weird. But you can use
Oh wow.
niwa and dewa. Those are the only two examples. Um, yeah, this is an interesting point too. So niwa is sort of like you're kind of stating a fact. You're saying like Nihon ni wa ita koto ga aru. So you're saying that I've been to Japan. Ita koto wa, sorry, ita koto ga. It's like the fact of being, or sorry, the fact of going to. Um, I have. So Nihon ni wa is like to Japan. That's what you're saying.
Oh yeah,
Is
yeah,
the
yeah.
topic. So like to Japan. The fact of going, I have. It's like the literal translation of that. 日本には行ったことがある. That's how you say that. 日本には, so 日本に行ったことがある. You can say that too, but again, it's like you're interjecting or injecting the wa in there, and so it's making the nuance that 日本には行ったことがある. You're kind of emphasizing the subject a little bit more.
Oh okay.
Like if somebody asked you, for example,
Oh, sorry. One
Asia,
sec.
are you good? All good?
Yeah, sorry.
Sweet, no worries. So if somebody asks you, for example, like Asia no kuni de wa, どこが行ったことありますか? So Asia no kuni de wa, like so, as for Asian countries, I use dewa there, right? Um, Asia no kuni wa is like Asian countries, but if I say dewa,
Okay, yeah.
it's more like as for Asian countries, Asia no kuni de wa, as for Asian
Oh,
countries, どこが行ったことがあり、アジアの国ではどこか行ったことがありますか? Like, have you been somewhere in as for the Asian countries? And then I'll say like, oh, 日本には行ったことがあります. Like, 日本には to Japan I've been. Basically, is how you say that. Again, there's just a bunch of different ways to say the same exact thing. Like you can say 日本に行ったことがあります. That's totally fine. That's totally valid. It's just a little bit of a nuance that's a little bit different. It's a little bit indirect and a little bit slower way to say it, as if you have more to say, type of thing.
okay.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of good examples down here. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can go ahead and read this. Yeah, like this is a good point too. So wise, you can use it for contrast as well. Again, there's a nuance of like not being as direct. Ga is more like this, right? It's emphasis.
Mm.
Ga is this, but wa is like a little bit less harsh or whatever, a little bit less direct, and you're like kind of leaving it open to talk about other things, or maybe talk about that subject more and ask more questions. 日本語
Huh.
が好きです is you're saying I like Japanese. 日本語が好きです You're saying like I like Japanese, but 日本語は好きです It's a little bit softer way to say that, and you're implying that there's maybe more to talk about. There again, it's just like less to the point, more just talking topically. And there's some other examples here, but we're kind of going along here, so I would
Okay.
encourage you guys to go read the article. It's interesting. There's a lot more to wa than what meets the eye, or whatever, however you say that. So I would encourage you guys to go read that.